There is a strange paradox in the adult world. The very days that once kept us awake with excitement, especially the day that marks our arrival in this life, have now become days we swipe past as quickly as a phone notification. A birthday, the thing that once made a child's heart race, has now become nothing more than a small line on a calendar. No fireworks, no countdown, no eyes filled with anticipation. And it is from that silence that we begin to see ourselves more clearly. But the real question is, what exactly are we seeing in that mirror? Modern life has conditioned us to surface-level gestures, replying to a few messages out of politeness, leaving a birthday emoji as a reflex, posting a quick story before rushing back to the relentless pace of daily life. Some people simply move through the day as they would any other, making coffee, unlocking the bike, going to work, clocking in, returning home. No cake, no celebration, no noise. Yet beneath those seemingly ordinary behaviors lies a layer of emotion no one sees. Within that crowd, there is always a particular group of people, those who treat their birthday as though it no longer holds much meaning. Not because they are emotionless, and not because they're adults now who don't need to make a big deal of it, but because they've lived through enough disappointment to understand that pain often comes from expecting too much. So they say, "I don't care about my birthday," but what they truly want to whisper is, "I stopped expecting it." A birthday reveals, more clearly than anything, how comfortable someone is with being noticed. Those who grew up surrounded by affection, by warm arms and heartfelt rituals, accept birthday wishes easily, as something natural. But those who withdraw, those who shake their heads whenever someone wants to plan something for them, they're not afraid of the spotlight. They're afraid of old memories. Memories of moments when they waited and no one remembered. Memories of nights spent blowing out candles alone. Memories of being pushed out of the priority list by the very people they once loved. A birthday is also a subtle test of one's ability to receive love. Some smile effortlessly when congratulated, while others grow awkward, unsure where to place their hands, unsure how to react, as if they are opening a room that has long been locked. A room filled with soft places they're afraid to let others see. And deeper still, a birthday touches directly the wound of those who have been forgotten. The years of being overlooked, the promises of next year will be different. The moments when no one remembered their presence all accumulate into a form of self-protection. They learn to withdraw, learn to tell themselves it doesn't matter, learn not to expect so they will not hurt again. That is when a birthday stops being a celebration. It becomes a mirror. And that mirror, in its quiet yet unflinchingly gentle way, is always more honest than we expect. There is one thing many people still misunderstand. They assume that those who treat their birthday like any other day are cold, detached, and don't need anyone, that they don't hope for anyone to remember them. But the truth is completely different. Behind that calm facade is not indifference, but a long history of expectations that were never met. The times they hoped someone would remember, yet the entire day slipped by without anything happening. And each time that happened, their heart stepped back a little, then a little more, until they learned the bitter lesson that hope is something capable of hurting you all by itself. When you are forgotten enough times, the brain begins to form a very particular kind of reflex, something psychology calls emotional self-protection. It's like touching fire too many times. Eventually, your body learns to pull away, even when you only see a faint red glow from afar. The heart works the same way. At first, you feel sad that no one remembered. Then you feel disappointed. Then you feel angry. But eventually, you stop feeling anything at all. Not because you've become stronger, but because the protection system has activated. It lowers your expectations to the lowest possible level to make sure you won't get hurt again. Birthdays, originally meant to be days of joy, become the places where this mechanism works the strongest. Those who have been forgotten, who once blew out candles alone, who sat staring at their phone screen just to see if a late message might arrive, they no longer want to experience that feeling again. So they convince themselves, "It doesn't matter. I don't need anyone to remember. There's nothing special about it." But beneath those words hides another truth. They are not saying they don't need it. They are saying they are tired of feeling disappointed. Emotional self-protection works silently like that shielding, while also taking away. It protects them from painful touch, but it also dulls the small joys they actually deserve. When you no longer expect anyone to do anything special for you, you also unintentionally take away your own chance to be moved, to be touched. And so birthdays, once moments of light and togetherness, now pass by like any ordinary day. The painful part is that they themselves don't even realize when this process began. They only know they've grown used to the quiet. That they no longer feel excited, no longer anticipate, no longer want to open up, as if their heart has learned to move slower, more carefully, but also more cautiously. Because every person can only endure being forgotten a certain number of times before they begin to build their own shield. This mechanism doesn't just affect birthdays. Once someone becomes used to lowering expectations to avoid pain, they begin applying it to relationships too. They call people less, expect less, trust promises less, and feel less deserving of affection from others. Not because they don't want love, but because they've grown too accustomed to standing at the edge, too used to being placed at the bottom of other people's priority lists. But here lies the deepest paradox. These people are not emotionless. They feel more than others. They are more sensitive, more perceptive, and because they feel deeply, they also hurt deeply. Emotional self-protection doesn't come from coldness. It comes from overwhelming sensitivity. It is the heart's way of saying, if I cannot be loved properly, then I must learn not to wait. A letting go that is rational yet painfully wounded. When we understand this, we realize that the psychology of people who treat their birthday like a normal day is not about indifference. It is about emotional survival. It is about hearts that once loved so fiercely they had to learn to go quiet. Birthdays are no longer anticipated not because they don't care, but because they once cared so much they had to teach themselves to stop. There are forms of loneliness that make no sound. They do not cry, do not call out to anyone, and do not demand attention. They simply sit there, beneath the calm surface that adults tend to wear. When someone says, "It's fine, it's just a birthday, I don't really care about it," what they are hiding is not indifference. What they're hiding is fragility. Because even when their mouth says they don't need it, their heart quietly listens, waiting to see if anyone remembers them today. This is not a contradiction, it is instinct. The human brain has a peculiar mechanism. It wants to be seen, yet fears exposing that need, because deep inside, a birthday is never just a day. It is an invisible test. No one creates it, yet everyone feels it. Just one message, one happy birthday, one moment of being called by name, and we know we still exist in someone's mind. But when silence stretches on, we cannot help but ask, in the most human way, am I becoming invisible? Even when a person pretends not to care, they still pay attention, quietly noticing, quietly counting, quietly waiting. The mind works like a radar, registering even the smallest movements around it. It hears the calls that never ring, the messages that never arrive. It pays attention to the people who once cared but no longer remember. And that attention reveals a truth. It's not that they don't need it, it's that they once needed it so much they were hurt by it, and now they fear the emptiness repeating itself. In psychology, there is a quote that captures this perfectly. Even pretending not to care is a form of caring. Pretending you don't need it is simply what happens after caring too much. Like someone who has been abandoned will always walk a little slower when entering their own room, just to make sure disappointment won't ambush them again. And then avoidance kicks in. Not avoidance of people, but avoidance of feelings. Psychologists call this avoidant validation behavior, when you convince yourself that you no longer need recognition simply because you fear the pain of not being recognized. The brain chooses the safest path. It shuts the door of expectation, keeping everything within a flat emotional range, safe enough not to hurt, but numb enough not to feel joy. This mechanism does not grow from emptiness. It grows from memory. From the years when they always remembered other people's birthdays, but when their own came, no one remembered them. From the evenings when they lit their own candle and tears fell onto their hands, from the moment at 11:59 p.m. after a long day when they realized no one had asked, "How was your day?" And after enough years like that, who still has the courage to hope? Modern society worsens this. Social media turns everything into a metric of attention. People with many friends receive hundreds of wishes. Those with fewer friends receive a handful. And adults, those so busy they've dropped parts of themselves along the way, sometimes have no one left who remembers to send a message. Under that weight of comparison, the brain forms a new shield. If I treat my birthday like any normal day, I won't have to measure anything anymore. But neuroscience shows an undeniable truth. No matter how strong we pretend to be, the brain always links our sense of worth to being seen by others. Not because we are weak, but because we are human. We are born with a primal need to know that we matter to someone in this vast world. When we understand this, we stop blaming ourselves for feeling empty. We stop calling ourselves weak for being sad when forgotten. And we begin to see that this loneliness is not a flaw. It is simply the consequence of a heart that once opened too widely, once believed too deeply, once hoped too much. And then it all circles back to one point, that silent loneliness does not mean we are cold. It means we have loved, believed, and hoped so much that we had to teach ourselves not to wait anymore. It is proof that we have a heart that feels, a heart once abandoned, but still alive, once forgotten, but still longing to be remembered, even if only by one person. If we look with gentler eyes, we will see that the silence is not a wall, it is a wound. And understanding that wound is the kindest way we can treat ourselves and others on a birthday or on any ordinary day of this life. It is strange how the older we become, the more we must perform to hide ourselves. We appear strong on the outside to conceal a heart that has been fragile too many times. We pretend not to need anyone because we once needed far too much. We stay silent not because we are calm, but because we've learned that speaking out changes nothing. Adults don't cry in front of others, yet they are the ones who break down most easily in the dark. This is the first paradox. The older we grow, the more we must pretend we are fine, so no one sees the part of us that is breaking. Birthdays or any moment that touches the passage of time are where this paradox becomes most visible. Adults are no longer excited, but not because they have transcended the need to be loved. On the contrary, adults often crave affection in the quietest way. They just don't dare to show it. There is a line in the original text that hits the soul's core. You can be content and still crave connection. Peace and the desire to be loved do not cancel each other out. But adults, because they have been hurt, will choose to crave silently. We often mistake an adult's indifference for coldness. We assume they don't want to be celebrated, don't like attention, don't need to be remembered. But most of these behaviors are merely a shell, a distorted form of freedom, one forged from disappointment, freedom from expectations, from hope, from the pain of being forgotten. We call it apathy, but in truth, it is the effort of a heart trying to protect itself. Those who once fell in front of a crowd will always choose solitude over noise. Those who were once forgotten will choose silence over hope. In the deeper layers of psychology, the inner conflict of adulthood resembles light reflecting on a still surface of water. The surface looks calm, but beneath it are thousands of movements no one can see. No one knows what they are wrestling with. No one knows what they are missing. No one knows they want someone to take the first step closer, yet fear that one wrong touch will hurt them again. Adults are like that, always longing, but always guarded, wanting to be seen but afraid of revealing that desire. Some people say gently, "My birthday isn't important to me." But buried beneath that sentence is a hidden confession. It's not that they don't care, it's that there is a memory inside them that makes that feeling dangerous. Years of expecting too much taught them that joy is sometimes a luxury. So now, they don't dare open their hearts too widely to anyone. They move through special days like a slowed breeze, not wanting to stir the water, not wanting to create hope. The most beautiful metaphor for this contradiction is the image of the shadow that walks beside us every day. A shadow is loyal, always present, but never asks to be seen. Adults sometimes become their own shadow, existing, present, but unwilling to take up space in anyone's world. They fear that if they step further into the light, they will see the truth too clearly. No one is waiting there. So they choose to stand in the dim threshold between light and darkness, where expectations are not too high and disappointment not too deep. What tightens the throat is this truth. Adults can love deeply, yet fear appearing like they need love. They can be lonely to the point of pain, yet always say, "I'm fine." They may long for someone to remember them, yet pretend they don't notice, because they know too well the feeling of being abandoned. And the brain, in its attempt to protect them from repeated hurt, creates a philosophical paradox. Self-protection becomes stronger than longing, and silence becomes safer than hope. This is the central insight. A person may choose a quiet life, but that does not mean they have given up the need to be loved. They are simply loving more carefully, like someone walking on gravel, fully aware that one heavy step could hurt them again. And when we fully understand the depth of this contradiction, we finally see something deeply human. No one is truly indifferent to their own existence. No one wants their birthday to pass like a breath. No one wants to grow so old that no one remembers them. Adults are simply trying to find a way to live, that their hearts can bear a way in which sadness won't collapse them. And joy, even the smallest one, can exist without causing pain. In the end, this contradiction is not a flaw. It is proof of life. Because only hearts that know how to love must learn how to protect themselves. Only those who have hoped must learn how to hope quietly. And only souls deep enough understand that silence is not the end of emotion, but a place where emotion finds another form of existence. Stiller, more ripened, and in its own way, more beautiful. That moment of softening makes you suddenly realize that you are not as strong as you once believed. It turns out that all those years, you were simply trying to live in a way that caused the least pain. It turns out that in the countless ordinary days when you forgot yourself, a part of you was still quietly hoping someone would remember. And that is what makes you recognize that a birthday is no longer a celebration of laughter, but the place where your older versions step out, sit down, and look at you with gentle eyes. We've made it this far. When the heart slows down enough, you begin to see every crease of the year that has passed. You realize you have grown not because of grand achievements, but because of small moments no one ever saw. The times you wanted to give up but kept walking. The nights you sat alone and let your tears fall without shame. The days you quietly healed old wounds with a tenderness you never had for yourself before. A birthday, in its own quiet way, becomes the point where all of that gathers a fragile pause, where you see yourself most clearly. No noise, no fireworks, no crowds, just you and the thoughts you haven't had time to listen to all year. And then you understand that a flood of birthday wishes may not warm your heart, but one sincere message, one gentle voice, or just one person who still remembers, can soften your heart in a way no party ever could. Not because you crave recognition, but because you need to know that in this vast life, someone still sees your quiet existence. From that moment on, you no longer demand your birthday to be special. You simply want it to be peaceful. A day when you can walk one step slower, take a long breath, and tell yourself, "I'm alive. I'm still here." That shift is not the abandonment of joy. It is the understanding that joy does not come from the crowd. It comes from the truth that you have become the person your past self once hoped to be. And when that thought rises quietly, you feel something heavy loosen inside you. Not the expectations you placed on others, but the way you used to blame yourself for expecting anything at all. In this silence, you no longer want to chase anyone's applause. You simply want to return to the softest, truest voice you have, your own. Perhaps in the end, a birthday is no longer the question, "Who remembers me?" but a far gentler one, "How have I remembered myself?" And when you have the courage to ask that, you will see that growing up has not taken joy away from you. It has only taught you to find joy in a different place, a quieter, truer place that will never betray you. And in the moment when everything becomes as still as the wind-shifting seasons, you realize something only adults understand. Sometimes, your very presence is already a form of celebration. A very subtle, very personal kind, but enough to warm your heart. The deepest paradox is this. Sometimes, when we treat our birthday like an ordinary day, we are honoring it in the most profound way. People assume that not celebrating means indifference, that not feeling excited means apathy, that not asking for anything means emotional coldness. But in truth, many people feel most at peace when their birthday is no longer a spectacle to display, but a moment to quietly turn inward. That is not a deficiency, it is a maturity of the soul, a kind of wisdom younger people have not yet reached. Just like after a great storm, the sky does not rush to shine brightly. It simply opens into a clear, gentle quiet. Seeing a birthday as a normal day is like that. Not loud, not radiant, but transparent enough for you to see yourself more clearly than ever. That is the first layer, the layer of returning. Returning to what no one can take from you. Your own presence, the beat of your heart, and the life that continues quietly each day. And then there is a deeper layer, where philosophy meets life. When you stop seeking external glitter, you begin to hear again the voice of your own being. The psychologists in the original text wrote, "They're redefining joy. They no longer need the world's permission to feel good about being alive. It is a quiet rebirth. When joy no longer depends on someone else's laughter, it becomes a form of inner light, a warm light, not as explosive as fireworks, but enough to illuminate your way back to yourself." Before, birthdays were tied to display, curated photos for social media, parties that looked grander than they truly were, greetings sent out as a ritual. Those things create a dopamine loop. The more attention you receive, the more valuable you feel. The more praise you get, the more you believe you are loved. But that is only the surface world, where people exchange polished versions of themselves while hiding the truest parts. When you begin treating your birthday as a normal day, the outer world becomes smaller, softer, dimmer. You begin stepping out of the need to be seen and return to the need to be understood. You no longer ask, "Who remembered me?" but instead whisper, "What have I remembered this past year?" That shift from performance to introspection is the second layer. In this layer, you look back at the days when no one knew how deeply you were hurting, the nights you collapsed but told no one, the moments you bravely stood back up alone, and you realize, not every victory needs applause, not every effort needs acknowledgement. You existed, you lived, you endured, and that is enough. Then comes the deepest layer, where all the turbulence of life softens into a gentle stillness. The birthday becomes an act of true presence. Not presence before the world, but presence before your own heart. The day is no longer a milestone for others to come to you. It becomes a milestone for you to come back to yourself. You don't need flowers, cake, or crowds. You only need a moment when life stops pushing you, so you can sit down and touch your own existence, not through a camera lens, not through someone else's greeting, but through the raw feeling of being alive right now. In that presence, you rediscover something you had long forgotten. You don't need many things to feel full, just a slower breath, an afternoon sunlight resting on your shoulder. A small, quiet, with no one rushing you, a life quietly growing inside you. These are things a child cannot understand, only a mature heart can feel them. That moment brings a peace difficult to describe, like standing before the ocean after the storm has passed. No cheering, no loud music. Just the steady sound of waves reminding you that time moves on, and you are still here. When a birthday becomes a normal day, its meaning does not disappear, it becomes purer. And the final thing that rises gently is a small but profound philosophy. Sometimes, the most beautiful part is not in the event itself, but in the awareness it awakens. People who treat their birthday like a normal day are not rejecting love. They have simply found a different way to love, one that doesn't need display, proof, or crowds. A way that only requires one person to understand, and that person is themselves. Like the light after a storm. Not dazzling, but enough to make you stand still and realize you've lived through another season. And perhaps, in the end, that is what makes an ordinary day become a truly memorable one. Perhaps, when we return to where we began, we finally see how far a normal birthday has taken us. At the beginning, we spoke about those days that once made us so excited we couldn't sleep, the childhood days, when we counted every hour just to see the eyes of those who loved us. And then we grew up, and that day suddenly became a faint shadow on the calendar. Quiet, still, light as a passing phone notification. Now, coming back to that starting point, we understand that this silence is not a loss. It is a kind of maturity that not everyone is calm enough to step into. Because beneath that ordinary surface, there are always two parallel emotional currents, running side by side like two waves that never touch. One is the calmness of someone who has learned how to stand firm in their own life. The other is the fragility of someone who still wants to be remembered even just a little. The original text has a line that is painfully true. Even when they treat it like nothing, there is always a small part of them whispering, "I hope someone still remembers." This duality is the essence of being human, always strong and always vulnerable, always self-reliant and always craving to be seen. And within that paradox, we realize we are not alone. What soothes the heart of an adult is not a grand celebration, but the feeling that their emotions are normal, valid, understood. That it's not just them who feels time slipping away at a terrifying speed. Not just them who feels that birthdays are sometimes mirrors reflecting old wounds they've hidden for years. Not just them who feels their heart tighten when night falls and they realize they're still counting who truly cares. The truth is, everyone has parts they never say out loud. Everyone has a soft longing buried deep to lightly brush against the fact of their own existence. To have someone look at them and say, "I see you." In a world overflowing with displays, what we truly need has never been fireworks. We need a gaze that isn't rushed, a presence that isn't conditional. That is when the human message of this entire journey reveals itself, that treating a birthday like an ordinary day is not closing the heart, but opening it in another way, a quieter way. A way belonging to those who have learned that real joy is not found in the crowd, but in what is most genuine. Those who treat their birthday like any other day are often the ones who have lived through enough collisions to understand that noise sometimes says nothing about love. They know that many greetings do not equal one person who truly remembers. They know presence is sometimes more valuable than gifts. They accept that their feelings may not match others' expectations, and that this does not make them any less worthy. But these same people, though composed, are also the easiest to move when someone crosses through the noise to reach them sincerely. When someone sends a heartfelt message. When someone remembers without being reminded. When someone shows up without needing an invitation. Because deep inside each person, there is always a child that never disappeared. The child who once waited for their name to be called, once hoped for a hug, once wished someone would light a small candle for them. And if we are gentle enough to see that part in one another, we will know that the most beautiful thing we can offer someone is not a flood of fancy words, but the reassurance that they are not invisible, that they are still seen, still heard, still felt. Some words are soft but linger deeply, like the line from the original text. You don't have to earn joy by being strong all year. We do not need to be unbreakable to deserve love. And those who treat their birthday like an ordinary day need to hear this even more. In the end, the message of this entire journey is not to tell anyone whether to celebrate or not, to be joyful or not, to expect or not. It is simply a gentle reminder. Allow yourself to feel whatever you are feeling. You are allowed to feel sad. You are allowed to feel relieved. You are allowed to want someone to remember. You are allowed to want a quiet day. No emotion is wrong when it comes honestly from within you. And then, when you stand at the end of the day and look back at yourself, you may whisper a small sentence that softens the heart. I am still worthy of being loved. Just that enough for a birthday, ordinary or not, to become a truly meaningful moment. Because sometimes, the most beautiful thing is not found in fireworks, but in the moment you realize that your existence, even in silence, is still a gift. And in that quiet, you hear this. you are still here. And that, in itself, is enough.